end your life.
Just like that.
You're still alive. You've got to be a little close to that. When I did the thing, I don't know if you always watch it, but when I did it last week, I said, this week we're going to be somewhere really awesome, and we're going to... I'm going to come from somewhere epic, and we're not. Well, we are. Home is awesome.
Yeah.
But everything changed. So I just tweeted and said a very different weekly update. Charlotte Link tested positive for COVID.
Yep.
You're negative now, but
yeah,
I shouldn't laugh. But it's just been one of those weeks. Last week changed our views on the pandemic and has dominated our lives. We're fine, and she's now negative. But that's what we're going to talk about this week. So should we talk about what happened? Because it has, I think, fundamentally changed our views.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you should definitely give, like, how it all kind of happened. Because we were at least lucky enough to know where we contracted it from. Yeah.
So we know the whole thing. So I tweeted the other day, it was the 29th, wasn't it? 29th we went and got our booster. So we've just like done all the shots exactly when they're meant to be done. We did the sort of the first shot as soon as we could, and Australia was kind of rolling them out by demographics. So it took a while for us, longer for you because you're young. But we did the first one, we did the second one, and then Australia was obviously just trying to manage the supply. So they went, okay, we're gonna start doing boosters. I think when we got ours it was like 5 months after the second shot, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 5 months and a day.
So yeah, we did ours 5 months and 1 day. In fact, it would have been 5 months, but we're having a Christmas party with a couple of our neighbours. We're going to talk about neighbours and my parents, and we're like, look, we won't, because that was on the 28th, so we won't get it on the 28th, just in case we're a little bit off colour. Yeah. We'll give it another day. And so we did it on the 29th, and I tweeted on that day, I was sort of saying to people, look, you know, like, do you mix and match the companies? Do you know, like we'd had 2 Pfizers, you know, do we get another Pfizer or do we get a Moderna? So anyway, we got a Moderna, and that was sort of the popular opinion. And you were pretty much okay, weren't you?
Oh yeah, I was fine.
Yeah, you were fine. I was fine.
I couldn't even feel the shot. Like he was just so good, guy. And then like the next day, I felt a bit more like a sore arm, just normal, and a sore armpit, of all things.
So we're like pretty much fine on the 30th, and then we went as far as I can throw a ball over the road. So we went to a neighbour's, and we'd planned on doing this already. And I mean, this is we have especially since you've arrived, we have a very friendly neighbourhood. And we often see people like literally within a stone's throw of our house. So we saw, and we probably shouldn't name anyone's names, but we can gesticulate. So we saw the people there and the people there, and my parents on the 28th, and they were all here, and it was like a nice night. And that's that we sort of did our Christmas there because we'd just come back from Hamilton Island, and then we did the shot on the 29th, and then we went over there, and we had like different sets of friends. So we had, I think we figured out a total of, there were like 6 couples that went, wasn't it? Yeah. So 6 couples that went like literally over the road, and it is a stone's throw. It was like it was over the road in one house.
Yeah. So, it was, and we weren't there for that long either because we felt a little bit run down after the booster. Yeah. So
we, in fact, was that like exactly? I'm trying to remember. It's just all become a blur now. Like it becomes a blur in the holidays anyway, and then it becomes a blur. No, that was 1 week ago. Was New Year's Eve. So it's it's 6:30 p.m. on Friday the 7th here for us at the moment. So we went there 8 days ago. Yeah. In fact, 8 days ago now we're over there, and we went over the road, and you came back for a bit, and then you came over there again. Then we left after 6. We got back before 8. Like we were there for less than 2 hours. Yeah. And we came home because we were feeling a little bit, booster, under the weather. And then we're like all getting ready to go away on our holiday on the 2nd. So we were going to go up to further up in Queensland and do awesome stuff, which we will do in the future. So we won't sort of spoil the surprise.
It's just postponed.
It's
not
postponed.
Cancelled.
But then the very next day, like the hostess that we'd seen, what was the message? You can explain that.
She was like, like Charlotte, I might have a bit of bad news. Woke up with all these, COVID symptoms, runny nose, what's it, runny nose, fever, headache. I'm on my way to get tested for COVID. I don't know when the result will be, but I hope I haven't ruined your holiday. I was like,
and we're like, I won't say what we actually said, but anyway. And then like 2 hours later, she's like, yeah, I'm positive.
Yeah.
And like when she first said that, maybe it's particularly me, but because I'm very analytical, it's like I'm doing all the maths. I'm like, okay, so what percentage of people that get tested actually test positive? Oh, okay, it's at the time, I think it was like single-digit percentages. So it's like, okay, odds are on our side, like how are we going to mitigate the risk of going away and possibly being sick?
Yeah, it's also because like in Queensland now they changed the rules the night before we went over there, didn't they? So
actually the entire country changed the rules. So right. Australia is a little bit like the US in some ways, insofar as you have like state laws and federal laws, and the federal, I'm not even sure exactly how it works. So basically the federal government decided that they're going to redefine what a close contact is. So literally on the night of when did we go? The 30th.
Yeah.
On the night of the 30th, they said, a close contact now is someone you live with, or if you have been within confined space for more than 4 hours. And we're like, okay, basically you're just doing that to try and alleviate...
Not shut down the country.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Try and take the pressure off the testing system. You're still none of the epidemiology or the biology or any of it has changed. Like, you were still in a confined space. But having said that, so we went over there. I stood outside for most of the time drinking beer with a couple of other people. You were not, I think we actually did the numbers. Like, we went back through the Ubiquity security cameras, and it's like, okay, Charlotte went out at this time and came back at this time, went at that time. And you were like 69 minutes.
Yeah.
But we both hugged the host.
Absolutely. And ate from the food that she was serving us.
And this is the thing, because even for all of the discussion around, like, don't get too close and don't touch hands, it's like, hang on, like, she walked around with trays serving us food, and she would have, like, you just picture all the particular... It's gross when you think about it, like all the stuff coming out of her mouth that landed on the food, and then she served us drinks. Oh, Stephanie's here.
She was absolutely... she was, like, the most, like, energetic, happy.
She was fine.
She was no, like, any indication that she would have... And she didn't... She's so responsible. She would never have actually hosted a party unless she felt that, like, if she had any symptoms.
And to be clear, when we say party, like, there was them and two of their kids and one of their adult kids and one of their partners. Yeah. And then there were, like, I think 6 couples and 3 kids. So yeah, like on the 31st, we were like, what the hell are we going to do? And long story short, we managed to just postpone the holiday, and we had no idea whether we'd be positive or not at the time.
I think it's a good thing. I think for us, especially here in Queensland and Australia, we've almost been a bit spoiled during the pandemic. So even for us, like when we went over there, you don't have probably the normal precautions that you would have elsewhere. Like, we are very much we've been able to hug each other here, and so I think that's the difference too. Well, I mean, I've even said on this live stream a few times, like, I think we got very very casual about the whole thing because we had so few cases, and for the longest time I was saying, like, we got a country or a state of 5.3 million people. It's twice the size of Texas, and we'd had like 7 deaths, which is no longer the case, unfortunately. But so that was the 31st, and we just, out of an abundance of caution, especially because we were meant to go on this holiday with my parents as well, who are both in their 70s, which is obviously a high risk demographic, and we just kind of went, stuff's getting so weird, that we managed to hold it off. And then I'm just looking now, because we put everything in a OneNote when stuff started getting weird, but basically we've gone over there with all these neighbours. We left before 8. Most of our other friends were like, we're there till like 1 a.m. And now these are people that should know better, really, than to be out till 1 a.m. Yeah, they should, but...
G'day if you're listening. But, no, I mean, in all seriousness, like, they were having a good time. But as soon as you say that, it sounds like...
But, like, both the hosts is like from Scotland and Ireland. Like, you just guaranteed to have the excuse? Best time. Yeah.
All right, so everyone's drinking. Richard Campbell's here too.
Nice.
Hey, Richard. So anyway, like, we kind of went, well, like, if anyone's going to get it, they're going to get it. Not just because they're out. So, like, they were there for, like, we're working on this 4-hour basis. We were there less than 2 hours. They were there more than 7 hours. And we're like, oh, well, you're stuffed. If anyone's going to get it. And then everyone there is then just sort of sitting around figuring out what happens next. So New Year's Eve, we were meant to have more of our friends over here, and we're like, nope, we're not going to see anyone. So we had New Year's Eve, just us and the kids here.
It's because all of them had been over there, the ones that were going to come here.
Oh, no, not all of them, because some of them hadn't been there the night before. But then we're like, you guys haven't been there, so you haven't...
Yeah, true.
And this is the problem, and I'm sure for many other people, you've been through this before, and there's like someone's just made a comment. So listen to you guys is almost like going back in time to the early 2020s in the pandemic. We just didn't have to worry about that here at the time because we just had next to no cases.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing New Year's Eve on our own here, and it was just like us and the kids, and we could sort of see the fireworks in the city from here. And I was tired, but the kids were like, no, I really want to start till midnight, so I'll start till midnight. And then the fireworks go off at midnight, and they're like, I'm bored, I'm going to bed in the middle of the fireworks. I'm like, why did we stay up? But looking at our chronology here, so on the 1st of Jan, you had like a couple of mild symptoms, but they're like super, super mild. And part of the problem is, and I feel like in a way we're probably talking to a bunch of people that have been through all this a million times, and they're like, what's new? But for us it was very new. But we just kept going, is this it? Like, did my throat just tingle?
Yeah.
You kept saying, did I, I feel a bit hot, And it's like, well, at least we can empirically measure that. So it's like thermometer.
That's true. It's probably because I'm Norwegian, I'm still trying to get used to the climate because it's like, it is very humid here as well.
But it's like, do you have a fever, or are you in Australia in summer?
Yeah.
So,
and it has been very humid lately too, so...
Yeah, and that's true too. Like, we often get up well over 90% humidity, and it's been up 30 degrees or something. And then as soon as you do anything and the aircon's not on, it's like, yeah, you're hot. But throughout the whole thing, you never had a fever, and at least with a thermometer, you've got some sort of empirical measurement.
My top fever was, not fever, but temperature was 37.2.
Yeah, which isn't a fever. It's like, you're fine.
Yeah.
That's Celsius, people. So, you were fine, but then on the 2nd, you woke up with a sore throat, slightly blocked nose, congested sinuses, and it's like really, really, really minor stuff.
Oh, yeah, but that's the one... that was before. Okay,
but it was very minor things. Actually, there was one other thing, and this is sort of core to the whole theme here. Richard says all Norwegians are hot in Australia. So, Richard, all Norwegians are hot, summer or not, mate. We agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. One of the big problems we got here in Australia, and I think it's similar in many other parts of the world, is access to testing. Now, I had, I was wondering today when I actually ordered this, I'll check another time, but I realised we had no home test kits. So in Australia we had rapid antigen tests, which are equivalent to the lateral flow tests they have in places like the UK. We had no tests, and I think it must have been around about the 28th, and I was like, we probably should have a pack. And I had seen them in Officeworks, which is just like our office supply store here, some weeks ago. And I was like looking at them going, one day I'll need to get some of those, and I didn't worry about it.
Yeah.
But then I went and started looking, and it's like they were really hard to get. And the only ones I could find were on Kogan. And Kogan just basically sells everything. It's largely electronics, but they also had rapid antigen tests. And the only thing they had left in stock was a pack of 20 for 200 Australian dollars, which is, what's that in GBP? Probably about 80 GBP, something like that. But $10 a pop, which that's reasonable. So I ordered those, and incidentally, they definitely did not arrive in time. So we get to the 31st, and we're figuring out what the hell to do, and my mum manages to find some in Coolangatta, which was 45 minutes away. So I'm like, I was going to say speeding. I wasn't speeding down there. I drove expeditiously at the speed limit down to Coolangatta and managed to get some tests. Fortunately we had some tests, because we were hearing that like getting PCR tests, like getting in the queue was...
Oh, yeah, it's a nightmare.
Well, people were saying it was hard. So we're like, okay, we've got to get rapid antigen tests. And so I managed to get some down there. This is New Year's Eve as well, so the chemists were actually shut. I had to call them up, and they opened the doors, and we went in and got the tests. So fast forward to like 2nd of Jan, and you're feeling like a little bit off. I was just reading here, temp showing 36.9. So just for people still in Fahrenheit, you're meant to be like basically 37. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty good. And I gave you the test. Now,
Oof.
you'd had a PCR test before, so you'd had a professional do it.
Yeah, and you know, like you do get teary when you do
Yeah.
that. But having somebody who hasn't done it before, that was painful.
I was basically testing in production. It's like,
I wish you watched that YouTube video before you tried it on me, because it was. But yeah, I think we realized that we got probably the test not correct, did we? Or maybe.
Well, we're not sure, but one thing I just realised when I picked this up, the reason I'm drinking out this big blue bottle, Australian Cybersecurity Centre bottle, is as soon as we got to the 30th and it's like you could be positive, we just went like full don't get sick mode. So it was everything from, we'd normally use these glasses, which we're kind of back to now, but this glass looks exactly the same as the other one next to it, so it's like, who's been drinking out of it? And there's 4 of us in the house. So it's like, okay, everyone gets their own bottle, and it's got to be different, completely different. And then everyone was like,
It's Freedom Day for me today.
Oh, today's Freedom. It was like, just drink as much water as you can and loads of vitamins and eating fantastically. We've had our first beer today in a week. It's just all that sort of stuff. But the test that we did for you on the morning of the 2nd came back negative. And then I'm like, did I stick it in far enough? Like, did I get it like right back up the nasal canal?
Yeah, because that's what you always think that it does, that it goes straight up. But it's actually going more out to the side, isn't it?
Well, it in the videos I watched an epidemiologist use a skull to demonstrate it, which wasn't weird at all. But he's like got a skull, and he's like, it's basically sort of got to go in. So I watched that, and then the next day, so that test was negative on the 2nd. And then on the 3rd, I did a test on you, and it was positive. And then I guess without sort of going into too much detail, not because it's gory or sensitive, but because it just gets repetitive.
Yeah.
But I mean, what were your symptoms?
Symptoms, mostly runny nose. Just clear, fluid, runny nose, a tiny bit of a cough, and just like I had like a little bit of ache just right here, which is like always when you feel like you have like a sore throat, it normally gets here. For me, it was just here.
But like I could hear, and you can hear the change of tone in someone's voice when they're a little bit congested. So, but it was only very, very. I think if you were here talking and people hadn't heard you talk before, people would be like, that's fine. But I think what was really interesting, and this is one of the cruxes of the things we learned, is that we were one of 6 couples that went over there. So everyone at the same time was like, hey, like, how do you feel? Do you have a cough? Do you have a fever? Like, what's going on? And we, because of the way the government guidelines had changed and we were not close contacts, we kind of went, okay, so we're not, I guess legally speaking, close contacts, but we were in close contact. So we went, okay, we will...
The washing machine just finished.
Oh, that's my bed sheets.
We'll come back to that. So we went, okay, we will go out for a walk, but not go near people. Or we went out for a paddleboard, but not go near people. So we went out for a walk on New Year's Day, and one person from one of the couples we saw on the other side of the road. And we're like, hey mate, how are you feeling? Is everything good? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. I just went and got a PCR test, came back negative. And we're like, all right, first of all, how the hell did you get that? Well, it was 9 a.m. on New Year's Day.
Everybody's been out.
So that's why, because everyone else was hungover and they didn't want to get one. And then we left and we're like, hang on a second. Wasn't it like a day and a half ago you were there? Like, is that reliable? And I think that part of the problem that we're all having, and even today we're still having, is just trying to figure out the facts. Like, what are the time frames? What are the ranges? What are, again, like numbers person, I want the numbers. And we kind of went, it just feels like that might have been a bit premature. And then he was one of the folks that would have been there until, I think he said he was there till 12:30 in the morning. So, definitely loads of contact. Now, he later tested positive. And I think he was
sick too.
Yeah, he was. Out of all the positive people, you got out of it the lightest.
I think so, yeah.
But he was quite unwell after that, and we kind of went, that's really pretty dangerous, isn't it? Because he would have had a false sense of security from getting his false negative. So he would have been out there like he was wandering around walking his dog, but I don't know if he went to restaurants or who knows. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, out of the 6 couples, there are 6 couples and 3 kids. All, they were 9, 11 and 12. So Ari and L, 9 and 12, and one other kid was 11. So out of the 6 couples and 3 kids, the only people who to date have not had any symptoms or tested positive is Ari, Al, myself, and one other adult.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we did that, because there's 15 people and 3 of us in this household who share my genes. Just saying, could be. Who knows? Not positive, which is kind of stunning, because if you think about it, so that's 15 people that went to the house, and then I think a couple of her kids were positive as well, weren't they?
Only her daughter, and then her boyfriend was negative.
Oh, okay, all right.
And Gordy was negative too.
Remember, we weren't using names. So anyway, that's okay. There's lots of them out there. I just found it fascinating that you've got 15 people that go to this thing, and if you take the kids out of it, because the kids seem to pretty much ride this out, and we've got a couple of friends who have got 9-year-old kids who have had COVID and showed 0 symptoms, but they just tested positive because they were doing regular lateral flow tests, that sort of thing. So who knows? Maybe our kids have, but I think the level of contagiousness is what kind of shocked us, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's especially considering pretty much everybody who was there was infected.
Yeah, and I have no idea how I wasn't. I mean, we got our booster the day before exposure, and it's meant to take a while, isn't it, for the booster to kick in?
And the night before I tested positive was the night I felt the absolute worst during this time, even before I went into isolation.
But then when we look around us, and it's actually been kind of weird, and we've been taking lots of photos, and I might share some of them at some time, but it's been very strange because most of us can see each other from our balcony, and you're sort of waving at people and yelling across the canal because we've got water on the back and we all sort of face around there. How are you feeling today? How's it going?
The sun has set and a garage door is still open.
Home automation's so cool. So we've sort of been yelling around at each other, and eventually we ended up using technology and creating a WhatsApp group as well. But, the folks here in their 60s got hit harder, and everyone was double vaxxed, at least double vaxxed, if not boosted as well.
Yeah, but the one that wasn't impacted at all, he is boosted and is probably the same age as the
in his 60s. Yeah. So we don't know, but they got hit probably the hardest because he's had fevers and so on. But I guess that's the other thing that kind of struck us. It's and it's not to trivialise it, but nobody has been any sicker than what any of us have been before. Is that a reasonable way of putting it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you sort of look at that contagiousness again, and the thing that kind of struck me is we're looking at it going, I can never remember a time ever when I've gone to drinks or a party or something like that, and 80% plus of people that were there have all caught the cold or the flu or whatever it was. And we've all been to events where people have been sick before. So there's certainly, even though we got out of this with very, very mild symptoms, and it sounds like most people around us are now on the mend as well, it's just stunning how contagious it was.
Yeah, and it's there was this Christmas party in Norway that really got a lot of attention in the news. One Omicron was starting to kind of spread. I think the deal there was that everybody who wanted to attend to the party had to actually be double vaxxed. They were, but still all of them got infected.
Well, look, I think the anti-vaxxers don't get it. I think we always understood that being vaxxed, double vaxxed, boosted was not a guarantee of not catching it. It was going to lower your chances, and it was going to reduce the symptoms if you did catch it. Now, did it lower your chances? Maybe it did for me and for the other guy and for the kids, but everyone else got it. Did it reduce the symptoms? Well, you never know, because we can't A/B test this, right? It's what would it have been like if we didn't have it? I don't know. So Phil's just asking here, he says, so you said in your tweet the last week has changed your views on the pandemic. What specifically about your views has changed? Well, I think the big thing that's changed, would it be fair to say we're much less fearful about it?
Yeah, absolutely. But then again, for me that's been in isolation, it's never really fun sitting there regardless, even though you're feeling mild symptoms. But then you do read a lot about it in the media, and there's often reported about very serious cases, and then you're just thinking like, you know, am I through it? Am I just on the start of it? Like, it's that uncertainty. But yeah, like I do feel like less fearful of it, but I also feel less fearful of it because I felt like we were so prepared.
Well, let's talk about your isolation in a moment, but to answer the rest of Phil's question, so I think the things that have changed, Phil, is where we're much less fearful of it insofar as our experience directly and the experience that we've observed in our like immediate vicinity with people of all ages. So the youngest is old, it was 9, and the oldest would be, what, mid-60s, I guess. You know, everyone's done pretty well out of it. So that has changed. The other thing that's definitely changed is just the understanding of how contagious it is. And as a result of, you know, now coming through this, it's like, until things settle down, like I kind of don't want to see people. I really don't.
Yeah. It's probably a bit easier. I can still catch it again, but it's probably a bit easier for me to had it. But still, like, at the end of the day, you need to kind of get on with your life. But I feel if we have the choice, which we do now in the school holidays, try and like reduce the impact.
I mean,
there's a crazy rapid exposure at the moment.
I don't think it's a binary thing. You know, you hear people say, "Oh, you got to live your life." It's like, well, what are you saying? Like, you either live your life or you don't live your life. It's like, are you choosing life or death? It's more a question of what's the right balance. So, you know, for us, and we'll have to talk about our environment as well, because we're fortunate to be in this place, but it might mean that we go out for walks and bike rides, or we go out on the water or something like that, but we don't go to a movie, or we don't go to a shopping centre. And that's sort of living our life insofar as we get to enjoy it and we get to do the things we like, but we minimise our risk.
Yeah, but like, let's say if you've had neighbours who's been in the same situation, and if, let's say, we all are that group that just stick together, like, then I wouldn't feel...
Yeah, but also, you know, it's summer in Australia, maybe we sit outside.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't hug. But, I mean, a good example of living our life, so our daughter was meant to go to a birthday party, which is probably a 9th birthday party, on Monday. And we ended up saying, look, it's just, regardless of our situation here, it's just too risky. You know, I'm really sorry. And like literally 30 minutes later, they cancelled the birthday party anyway because of the riskiness. But let's talk about your isolation, because that was the other thing. So we kind of had this situation where it's like the kids and I had no symptoms. You had mild symptoms, then you had a positive test. And in fact, the day of the negative test, which I still don't know if I screwed up, we still slept in the same bed. And I didn't tell you at the time, but I was like, maybe I just face the other way. Like, you know,
did you?
Yeah, because I was like...
I remember I was like, my hand was over at you, and you're like, oh, we shouldn't hold hands. That's what you said. You're just waving me away. I was like, oh, okay.
But...
romantic.
Everyone's kind of winging it, right? Like, everyone's figuring out what the hell do we do? Now, once you tested positive, we just went, like, okay, we...
Oh, I remember that so well. We were sitting in the bedroom on the chair, and, like, we'd just gotten up in the morning, and this was before we even had coffee, and you were like, okay, let's just do the test. And if you do the test and you test positive, you have to isolate here until you test negative. And I was like, say what? And then it came back positive, and it's like, right, so 5 days later...
So we sort of, like, no one knows who's sick and who's not. So we took the view of, you've got symptoms, you've tested positive, like you've got it.
Yeah.
So we went, all right, we'll just literally shut the doors to the master, and you won't come out until you test negative. If I test positive, or if the kids test positive as well, we'll just deal with that and we'll figure it out in the time, or if we show symptoms. So yeah, that's what we did. So we shut the doors, and outside the doors we put hand sanitizer. The kids and I all had our own mask. I don't know if you saw, but I wrote like a little letter on it. So it was like an A for Ari and E for L, D for Dad. Wrote little letters on it. And any time we came in to like give you food or drink or things like that, it's like we put the mask on, you put the mask on. We had a little stool that you weren't using that we'd sit like several meters away on. And we did that. So all of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, is it? What's today? 7th.
Yeah.
Did we do it? No, because you tested positive on the 3rd, didn't you? So 3rd, 4th, 5, 6. So you did that almost for 5 full days because you tested negative earlier today. So we just kept doing that. And you just stayed in the room. But I like the number of times we went, I feel so sympathetic for people that are in an apartment or something like that, or a small space where they don't have the options.
Or in like just hotel quarantine.
Or hotel
it doesn't have
quarantine,
any
yeah.
balcony. You're not there surrounded maybe with your family, or just like for us, it's like I could literally walk out on the balcony and look at you guys playing in the pool and have a chat with you guys. And
that's we're a bit fortunate because you had an ensuite. You had a master with lots of room, and you had a balcony that had sun in the morning. So I was getting like alerts on my Apple Watch. It's like, Charlotte's just figured or completed a yoga workout. And it's like, okay, let's you making the most of it. So you
discovered Apple Fitness.
All right, so yeah, pro tip, Apple Fitness seems to be good.
Yeah.
So you just stayed in there, and then we literally made all of your meals, all of your drinks.
No chores.
You didn't do any chores.
And I got to see all of my Scandinavian TV shows in peace and quiet.
You sound like you're enjoying this.
Well, I think it's really important when you are in isolation. It's really easy to become negative. So you just have to like really focus on the good stuff. It's like just take it as a spa retreat almost. Like just focus on your health. Eat well. Watch TV shows. Like try not to think about the negative stuff, because it is really easy to just sit there and feel sorry for yourself, or feeling isolated, or and
it's really weird too, because we had masks on the whole time, and the masks have been I guess until several months ago in this state, there'd been a really rare thing. I don't think the only time we had worn a mask up until probably the middle of this year was either on an aeroplane or going into an Apple shop.
Yeah.
Like that was it. It just wasn't a thing. So it was very weird for us to see each other with masks. But then as you said, like you could be on the balcony and you can see down to the pool, or we're out the back in the canal and you could see down there, and we're like, 10 meters away or something. And you could like wave and talk, but it was just super, super, super strange.
Then again, I felt almost like there was an isolation community for us, because since all of our neighbors were in isolation, we all kind of came out and we stood on our jetties and we were kind of, yelling over the canal, asking how they were doing. Like I felt like at least I wasn't missing out on a lot of things. It's not like people were taking their boat out.
But what was different is that you were the only one that was isolated to one part of the house. So everybody else, that they basically all had it, and even the couple with the other child, the 11-year-old over the canal from us, they were all sort of, I think they slept in separate beds or something like that, but they were still all out there together, and it looks like the child has had it as well, very mildly, but yeah, you got locked up inside the house, and I think you know this, but I just basically made the kids do loads of stuff. so we literally had Ari.
I wish I could do that.
He did good last night though. He made nice salmon last night. He was enjoying
I
that.
had the best room service on that isolation.
Al was making you like sorbets and things like that, so that was pretty good. And maybe we'll share photos later on. Bringing you up like Heineken Zeros, so that was pretty good. But we. Like your symptoms disappeared really quickly because they were so mild, and you didn't have any yesterday. And we're like, the problem now, and we'll talk more about the testing in a moment too, but because the tests are so hard to get, we're like, when do you burn a test? Because every time you use a test and it's positive, like we need, and I'm not sure if it's like legally or you just should, but we wanted to see a negative test before you came out of there.
Yep.
So we ran one yesterday morning and you came back positive straight away, and we're like, okay, well.
Yeah, it was a really clear positive.
I'm not like we all kind of joked about it. It's like, is it like being half pregnant or not? Like, can you be half COVID? Anyway, but some people had said, like, one of our friends over here, he said, look, he got a weak positive. So, well, that probably means you have it. So anyway, like I guess we burned that test yesterday, and then we got to today and did it again, and you came back in the clear, which is good. I mean, it's always just a matter of time, but everyone's trying to figure out how long it is. And then on the PCR testing, I mean, this is just an absolute mess in Australia. and I know it is in other parts of the world too, but it seems like the system has just been so rapidly overrun that, this is partly why the government changed their requirements, where they said, look, now you're only a close contact and you need a PCR test if you've had more than 4 hours. And it's like, hang on, it's like one breath of someone else's mucus. That sounded really bad, didn't it? But you know what I mean? Like one breath, and that's enough. But they're trying to alleviate the pressure, and we had PCR requirements for people travelling interstate because we've been locking down borders. That had to go. And now we're seeing these test numbers, which are astronomically high, but out of everyone we know, probably 10, 20% at most have actually been able to get a test.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Even like a friend of mine, she's based here on the Gold Coast. She said she was on a PCR, she called it festival, basically. So they were up at 3:30 a.m. this morning, and there was a long line in front of the test centres.
But see, then Rich has made a comment here. He says testing positive does not mean you're infectious. PCR tests can show positive results for months. And this is part of the problem too, where I don't know. Now I trust Richard, so I trust him more.
Richard is a very smart
more
guy.
than just about anyone. But everyone is sort of grasping for shreds of information, trying to figure out what they can and can't do. I don't know if I'm positive now and I'm asymptomatic, or the kids are positive and asymptomatic. And based on the guidance that we had from the government like a week ago, if you're a close contact, which we now are by any definition because we've been living in the same house, we should return a negative test before we go out into the community. So I think the kids and I will do that over the weekend out of an abundance of caution.
Can I do the swab test?
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Now that you know how to do it. But yeah, that's just kind of a worrying thing, because we are all kind of guessing. We're just so guessing.
But yeah, but with the rat test as well, like even when we saw for some of our neighbours, they weren't sure whether they've done it right. There's a lot of frustration around the rat test. Like you can see that a lot of people just seem to fall back on the PCR test and find that they trust that more than the rat tests.
Well, now we're hearing from the government that if you have a positive rat, you don't need to get a PCR, which kind of makes sense, because I think one of the great epiphanies, and maybe to go back to the question before that, I think it was Stephen that asked, it's like, what's changed of your view? My view of the testing has changed. So, Charlotte she's not on the record anywhere as having had COVID because you've never done a PCR. I was listening to the Premier of our state Premier today doing a talk, and she was saying there's a hotline you can call, I think, if you have a positive rat. But it's like, well, for what?
Yeah.
And we're going to have an app soon, and then you'll be able to report. And, maybe that makes a bit more sense. But we just kind of got to the point where, like, well, and this is not to sound like an anti-vaxxer, or it's like, it's just like the flu or something, but what would we have done then? Well, it always went under the radar unless you went to the doctor, and then it wasn't centrally recorded anywhere. So I guess what's changed my view of the testing is it's like, particularly when the supply of the rats is really limited, like there's got to be a good reason to test. So, if you've got symptoms and you've had exposure to someone else, is that a good reason to test? Because you probably shouldn't be going outside anyway.
Probably not.
Like you should be waiting until you have no symptoms, and then you need to go out, and then you're okay, now let me make sure. And this is, I guess, the view I took with the kids and I. Like, we could have tested over the last few days, but we would have burned a limited supply of tests, and we don't know when we can get more. And if we need them to go back out... So it's just interesting to hear all the comments here. Someone here says, now you have to report your positive rat in Victoria.
Oh.
Well, that's... I'm just not even sure how I feel about that, because that's something that's, first of all, self-assessable. So you have to, number one, take the test correctly, number two, be positive, and number three, have the impetus to actually report it. And then number four, like, what is it actually... What's the upside?
Yeah.
What's the... And it's not to say that people shouldn't do this, but I'm just literally trying to think through it and go, okay, well, if you report positive, what does that actually do? And then if you report negative, actually, that's a good question just there for Nick 007. If you report negative, or if you test negative, do you have to report that? I don't know.
Isn't it more for them to figure out how many people are infected versus who's in the hospital to see if it's actually less contagious? Like, that's like a lot about that in the media in Norway at the moment, just trying to figure out, okay, there is a lot of infection, but it's still not pressures on the hospital.
Well, that seems to be the more reasonable measure. And I've been, for ages, as you know, like every day I've been watching the numbers.
Oh, you are the COVID man. Like, I feel like you know everything that needs to know.
But it's just been a fascination with the numbers. And when we come back to the discussion before, it's just like, numbers guy, I like seeing that. But now that the numbers are so massively underreported and are probably not even that consequential, what's probably more relevant is what are the hospitalisation numbers, because that's more reflective of the pressure on the system. Someone here says, why are we testing yet the result does not change the treatment process? Which I think is very true, because we kind of went, if we, let's say someone's got symptoms, our friends over here, so they were debating, so they made multiple attempts to go and get a PCR. In fact, I think the comment that she gave you one day was they got turned away at like 9 a.m. saying there's already people here that are going to be queued up till 5 in the afternoon, and people are literally arriving at 4 a.m. and sleeping in their cars. And then, I don't know if you heard it, but she told me a story, because you're in your balcony, saying Charlotte was like Rapunzel, like she's up on her balcony.
Yeah, called the Princess Tower.
But I was talking to them, and they said one of their sons went to an event and someone was positive, and they ended up taking their car to the queue, parking in the queue, like in the evening, going home.
Really?
Yeah, and then coming back to their car the next morning, and then just getting in. And said a whole bunch of people were pissed off. But see, and this is the problem, like if they had one of those rapid antigen tests and they could have just done it at home, they wouldn't have needed to do that. Anyway, but to the point here, what does the testing... Let me start again. Why are we testing, yet the result does not change the treatment process? So when they were saying they want to go and get the PCR test, remember I was saying at the time, it's like, well...
Why? Because you know that you kind of...
Because what... Maybe the right question, and I think this is the point Tourist here on YouTube is making, what will you do differently if you get a positive versus a negative test? So if you're positive, you're going to stay at home, take lots of fluids and vitamins and get rest, all the rest of it. If you're negative, you're still sick because you've got symptoms.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like that the value of the test is only once you are well, demonstrating that you're no longer positive. And then to Richard's point, maybe you weren't contagious anyway, but at least it proved you're no longer positive. And someone's probably going to pop in now and say, just because you're not positive doesn't mean you're not contagious. And then we'll be like, oh, shit.
Well, somebody had already said that, I think.
Ah, crap. Okay.
I'm just like sometimes struggling to read the comments and listen to you talk at the same time. That's where I struggle as a bilingual.
Because it's all in a weird language. I'm sorry. So Stephen here said in the UK now, positive LFT, so lateral flow test, or RAT, no longer requires a PCR follow-up. So that's the same here in Australia now.
Yeah.
So that was, breaking news.
But even though, like, let's say it's for people that is currently sitting in isolation, they can't do the PCR test and they're not able to get a hold of the RAT tests. Like, what do you do then?
I think you just wait until you're well. But we're all talking about people that have symptoms which for the most part aren't too serious. Our hostess, who seems to be the point of original infection, and incidentally, she feels about as terrible as you can all imagine she feels, right? Because I was going to say it's not her fault. It actually is, it is her fault, but it obviously wasn't conscious or deliberate, and no one has any hard feelings about her. But she's the one person that ended up in A&E. And she went to A&E, and I think they basically just sent her back and sent her home and said, take Panadol, right?
Yeah, so just take more Panadol and rest up. And she's feeling much better now, but...
And that was only, 3 days ago? She went to A&E?
Yeah.
About that? Yeah.
So,
Nick 007 here says, I think the only good thing about reporting it is so you have it on record. If you test positive again more than 7 days later, you can get cleared by a doctor to fly or go out again. Possibly. We're not flying anywhere for the foreseeable future, are we?
But I'm so glad that, let's say if we'd done that test on the 1st of Jan that I took that was negative. Was it as negative on the 1st or the second?
No, second was negative.
Well, that was like if we'd gone on our holiday.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've like ended up sick
Well,
away.
This was kind of our worst nightmare because we were going to fly to Cairns, which is 2 hours that way. So still in the same state because that avoided all the testing problems and things. And then we're going to go on and do other things that we'll talk about another time. But we're sort of like, what would happen if we got there and then any of us, because at that time we were like, look, any of us could be positive. What would you do? Like, you'd be in the hotel. Would they kick you out after because we're only going to be there for a little while, so will they kick you out after that, or do they have to keep you there? And then you're in the hotel. Like, if we're going to be, and if remember at the time, we're like, if we're going to be sick, we want to be sick here at home, because it's just so much easier to manage.
You can even see now, like the article you sent me the other day, we went to Hamilton Island over Christmas, and like now that's all the day trips are pretty much shut down, aren't they?
I don't think they're even taking any more people at the moment, even for accommodation. So where we were, like, it was only just over a week ago, wasn't it? 10 days ago.
Yeah.
10 days ago, 11 days ago. Yeah, you can't even go there anymore. And that's the other big thing that's happening here, and I know that it's very similar in other parts of the world too. We're just seeing all of these businesses having to shutter, not because they can't get customers, but because their staff are sick. Like places down here where we would normally walk to all the time. We haven't been able to do that last week. But, they're literally like, we've just had to shut because we don't have the staff. But I guess on the plus side, assuming their experiences, and if they're working in hospitality, they've had to be vaxxed or double vaxxed since 17 December anyway. So, they're double vaxxed. Most hospitality staff, I guess, are younger as well. Like they're, do they have a week off like you? And
well, remember when we were staying at Qualia, they thought they had one case and they had to have multiple guests isolate in addition to the staff, because that's when you're talking about that 4-hour close contact. And I think that's why they had to change it, because so many ending up in quarantine.
But that night was probably 2 weeks ago, where we spoke to one of the staff at the hotel, and they're like, yeah, someone was here and they're positive. And we're like, oh, holy shit, like there was corona in near us. And it was at this like tasting night that we were going to go to, but then we didn't. And so, shit, we could
drink champagne by the pool instead.
That could have been us. How quickly that changes. Rento Mobo BTV. It's a bit hard to read from this distance. Most people are not going to follow the rules. They're too complicated and you can't find test kits. And I think that's really true as well. So the big thing that kept hitting us is that we're looking at all the numbers, because we're numbers people, and we're like, this is just so far from the truth, it's not even funny.
But there was a case in Norway, and I know I have a lot of Norwegian references, but it's because I'm Norwegian. But before Christmas, there was somebody that was literally selling negative rat tests for people to buy.
You didn't see this because you're doing your hair for this when I tweeted it. But this is in Apple News today. This is okay. We got to laugh. The story here is why you shouldn't share pictures of your COVID test online. And this is the headline. And then the body of the story is basically because it could be used as evidence to falsify a negative test. They have illustrated this story with a photo of someone holding a negative test.
Right.
The story about don't share. Anyway. But also, like, is this your proof? Is your proof of a negative test to walk up with like a JPEG on your phone and go, hey, look, that's just ridiculous.
It is.
But you can't really just test everyone on the way in. It's like, let me just stick this up your nose and swab you. Now, please wait here for 15 minutes just to see if you...
But in fairness, though, those rat tests, the result comes through a lot quicker than 15 minutes.
Someone's asking here about non-COVID stuff. Not today. This is the exception here today. I mean, Stefan's making the point here. Like isone's a similar sort of thing. And isone, the point of the test is mostly for tracing, so the authorities can contact those. Let me see if we can just zoom that.
Yeah, thank God, because I was wondering if my eyes are getting bad. Because I was just
mine are too. Scott's here. So Scott...
Oh, you're old. So.
Yeah, but I could read it. Scott says, do you think the Novak Djokovic will get to stay in Australia? So for folks not following the tennis, I think there's a story will be on tennis. So Novak Djokovic, world number one, 20 Grand Slam titles, same as Federer, same as Nadal. He's got the best chance of being the greatest of all time, at least in terms of wins. He had COVID early on, so he had COVID probably about 18 months ago. And he obviously got over that. And there's all this... Australia's got really strict border controls. So, at the moment, like, your family can't come here.
I know.
We've only just had the ability, say, for me to fly out, but I don't want to because of COVID. So anyway, to get into Australia at the moment, you've got to be double vaxxed or you've got to have a medical exemption. And Novak Djokovic he's sort of making these claims that because health and privacy and everything, he's not going to disclose his vax status, which just frankly is stupid. So I'm going to upset people.
But he says he's contracted COVID within the last 6 months, so that's the requirement. But he's still, like, our PM's been out there just going, look, you got to be double vaxxed. Yeah, you need to be vaxxed. Like, it doesn't matter if you've had the COVID, you still need to be double vaxxed to get in, unless you have an exception. But he only had COVID, but he doesn't have the shot.
It looks like there's some... I mean, frankly, it's all on him. And I think that the problem now is that the Australian government is trying to say nobody gets special treatment, which us as Aussies are very, very much behind, because we're a little bit tall poppy here, where if someone seems to be getting preferential treatment because they're important, everyone's like, screw you, man. It's like, we're not very happy with that. So anyway, he appears to have appeased Tennis Australia and the Victorian government, but not actually had the right exemption to meet federal requirements. So our borders are controlled federally. You don't get to just decide down in Victoria that someone's allowed in, because otherwise they come in there and then they go somewhere else in the country. So he's been detained. He's locked up in quarantine, the same place that they've been keeping asylum seekers. That's the big story at the moment.
Yeah, I saw that.
So
yeah.
they're like, no. And then the Serbians are like, this is anti-Serbian. It's like, oh my God.
Well, it's because it's an Orthodox Christmas, isn't it? So they want him to be in a better accommodation because it's an Orthodox.
Oh, that's going to go down real well. But the problem, it's become such a big issue, and he's mounting legal things, and then like his father's like, he's being held captive, and Australian government's like, no, he can go home whenever he wants. Like that's. So in answer to Scott's question, I don't think he'll get to stay. I really don't, because it just sends such a poor message in terms of preferential treatment. That and clearly he didn't have all his docs and paperwork in place before he came here. I think it'll be a miracle if he gets to stay, and I think there'll be a huge amount of outrage if he gets to stay. So I love watching him, and I would love to see him play, but I'd like to see him get booted out.
Harsh.
Controversial. Yeah, well, particularly when you look at all the shit we've gone through lately. And
yeah.
Like, I was going to say everyone's trying to do the right thing. Even we know people that are anti-vaxxers and we don't see them. Stephen says, wondering when someone's going to mention Djokovic. Stefan, we've had a really good team of people, MAD, EUP of police and healthcare professionals doing all the tracing, I think, made up of police and healthcare professionals. I mean, this is the other thing, like, there's not a lot of politicians I think we really like. Like, it doesn't matter what side of politics you're on or where you are in the world. Most people think that politicians are dickheads. But, holy, like, they've had such a rough time of it. Like, no.
I feel sorry for them.
I think our Prime Minister's a dickhead. But, holy shit, like, he's just been dealt such a harsh card. And it doesn't matter what people do, you're wrong. It's like the big debate here in our state has been... Yeah, there are people screaming, open the borders, just to the other state, like let people from 30 kilometres that way in. There's all this pressure to do that. And now there's all these people going, you should never have opened the borders because now we've got COVID here. And like Western Australia, which is a significant portion of the country, they've got very few cases there, and they're like, see, we didn't open the borders. And I didn't tell you this, but I bet Kit, my mate down in Adelaide, who we were with bang on a year ago now, I said, I bet you within the next 2 weeks, WA is going to be having 100 cases a day, like plus, easy, and then it'll be thousands. Like you just can't. You know how big that border is?
Nope. I'm still learning about the geography in Australia.
I think the border between Western Australia and the rest of the country is about 3,000 kilometres.
That's insane.
Like it's massive. It's just ginormous. Brendan, I can't tell if the rain fucked up my headphones. or if it's something else, or if the mic setup is off. I think
it's his
I think it's you, mate. I think we're okay. Well, this is something else, not COVID related. It's weird to go, no, this is tech, it's off topic. But Scott's been travelling a little bit. When we landed in Oslo for Christmas, they tested everyone on the way out of the airport. Just sit down for 15 minutes and wait for it to develop. Okay, that's interesting. So, Scott, what would have happened if you were positive? And then a little bit further down, he says, as Charlotte said, you don't normally need to wait 15 minutes to see the line, but it allows a weak response to develop and be visible. So when we tested you today, you're just anxiously watching. It's like you see the what do they call it? The control line, and we're like, okay, the control line's there, and then you're just watching. Where's the other one?
And then you see that it's kind of passing the first mark, and then you're just like, and then it starts to become really clear on that one line. And you're like, yes. It's like racing.
When you were positive the other day, it's like immediately that line was there, wasn't it?
Yeah. No doubt.
So AK Tech here has actually asked a non-topic question because made a comment. Novak is going to stay, win the court case on Monday and shock everyone, and ScoMo will not be happy about it. Look, honestly, I think it could go either way. I'd like him to get booted out just on principle, which I think is the way most of Australia feels. But there is a legal process, and regardless of how most of Australia feels, if he does meet the criteria, he'll get to stay. If he doesn't, I'm pretty sure he'll be booted out. We'll see. So Stefan said the same thing about everyone getting booted. Now Scott says your mic is peaking a bit. Troy, is the gain too high? We haven't changed it, but I'll take it down just a little bit, and we'll see. AK Techring's money will win at the end. Yeah, if there's even a whiff of that, we'll see. We'll see. We'll find out very soon. What else has happened that was relevant?
Well, I've been stuck inside a room for 5 days, so I only got out 4 hours ago, so
I know. And then we're like, how long can we leave it?
Yeah.
Because we're like, we don't want to burn a test prematurely.
That's true. Well, I had to spend an hour and a half just sanitizing the entire bedroom.
Yeah, so it was like, hey, you're negative. Just clean everything up and then come downstairs. So yeah, you sanitized everything and then chucked everything in the wash. And look, is it enough? Was it too much?
I
don't know. Maybe in a few days we'll have a better idea of that. Luca says, an official Italian software for generation of vaccination passes displayed a preview of the digitally signed QR code before saving. So criminals just took a photo of the QR and then discarded it.
Yes.
This let them have an officially signed QR code without leaving any trace in the logs, not even an authorized user who generated it. That's pretty impressive. As what I say, necessity is the mother of invention. Like, people will work out ways. But I think another side of this, so we're talking to Raf, our mate who runs the restaurant here, Scott knows Raf, the other day, and he runs an Italian restaurant, and he's a part-time flight attendant, so he got the double whammy. But he's a super positive guy, and he was worried leading up to the 17th of December, where we required all hospitality staff to be double vaxxed. And anyone entering the premises as well. If you want to go and have a pizza, you have to be double vaxxed. And he was worried about that, about his staff becoming the police people of the anyone who enters. But when I spoke to him the other day, he said it's actually been really good. He said, everyone who comes in pretty much understands that. Our vaccination rates as a country, we're over 92%, I think, double vaxxed for age 16 plus. So you're left with a small single-digit percentage of people who know that they shouldn't be there. If some of them try it on, it's a very, very small fraction. But I think I'm just raising this in response to Luca's point here. I don't think any of these systems actually have to be perfect to work. Even if there are, and I'm sure that there are venues. I mean, we went to venues after the 17th that didn't check our vax status. Yeah. So even though it's not perfect and not everyone's testing or checking, it's obviously still been impactful, right?
Absolutely.
What are our numbers? So We go to covidlive.com.au. As a nation, we're 91.9% double vaxxed. But then the problem is our state is 87.5%, and our city is lower than that. So I don't know if you saw, but the Premier was like singling out the Gold Coast today. She's like, you guys need to do better because we're somewhere south of that. So AK Tech says, when Australia was in lockdown, Hollywood actors came to Australia. I scrolled off there somehow. Hollywood actors came to Australia and they went to live in Byron Bay.
Well, actually, a lot of them are living in the Gold Coast at the moment because that's where a lot of the movies are being shot. And George Clooney, he was staying at Hamilton Island.
Yeah, so he was him and Julia Roberts apparently.
Yeah.
There's again a bit of a challenge, which is this balance of how do you have a consistent set of rules, and then how do you also keep economies going?
But they still had to isolate. I don't think Djokovic was supposed to isolate when he got here.
No, but I think he had the option where he could isolate for 2 weeks. I don't know. We'll find out when we see all the new stuff soon. But, with sort of A-list Hollywood folks coming here, if they fly in on their private jet and they stay in some exotic mansion for 2 weeks, but they are meeting the requirements that everyone else has to insofar as they are forced into quarantine, and if they require double vaccine, then they're double vax. Like, I don't have an issue with that, and I don't have an issue with the government applying the same set of rules, but giving them the ability to do that in a way that keeps this industry going too. We're trying to have a film industry, particularly here on the Gold Coast. Mm. But I think it's a bit like the Djokovic thing where no one wants to see people getting shortcuts because they've got the means.
Oh, no, but all of them have had to quarantine when they've got here.
Yeah, and usually when that doesn't happen, we don't have much patience for that. Just Google Barnaby Joyce and the dog. You know that story? No, it's Johnny Depp. So Johnny Depp flew into Australia. This was several years ago. It was him and was it Amber Heard or someone who is now like having a massive legal battles.
Right.
They brought their dogs in without having them go through quarantine. So Barnaby Joyce, who's one of our politicians, who's very, very Australian and outback, he's basically, I think he literally said, we're going to put the dogs down. So it's like, right. And then they had to go and create this video about how sorry they were. So no, normally you don't stuff around with that stuff. Someone else heard clipping. I hope that was a while ago, and we're clear now. Tourist, would you now get another booster after contracting COVID? Because that is what you're expecting from Djokovic. Yeah, absolutely. You get another booster, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah,
totally.
If that's
why
what
wouldn't you?
Like honestly, if that was also why I handled this so well.
Well, we think, but we can't. Again, we can't A/B test it.
No.
But as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of one of those things where everyone who has an opinion against this and sort of says go and do your research is basically just searching out the things to support their confirmation bias.
I trust the experts.
I trust the experts.
Yeah.
I heard a funny comment the other day. It's someone saying all these people quoting Kubler-Ross. It's a little bit so Kubler-Ross is this sort of this concept that people are much more confident in their assertions than what they actually know, and then they quote this to try and I've stuffed that up. It was funny, just believe me. So yeah, you would get another booster. I don't know, maybe I've had it, but I'd get another booster anyway. Nick 007 says I completely agree with Troy. I dislike Dan Andrews and Scott, but he has been dealt a shit hand. Yeah, they all have been. They all have been. Boris Johnson's been dealt a shit hand. You guys hate him, but you know. AK Tech can't get out of Canberra. I'm just scared to get COVID or be a close contact. Travelling is so risky now. I guess it depends on your situation, but like this is our office anyway, right? Like we work from here. We live in a very outdoorsy place anyway. The kids are off school for another 20 days. The Premier today indicated that maybe for Elle, because she will only become eligible for a shot on Monday, so 5 to 11-year-olds will become eligible on Monday. The Premier said primary school kids might not go back for the first week or two. And you can do that without it really having lifelong impact, right?
Oh, yeah.
But Ari's 12, he's double vaxxed. He can go back on the 27th and possibly have to wear a mask.
He's a big boy now.
He's a big boy.
Senior school.
He's been cooking dinner. So.
Yeah. He's a good cook too.
Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit because there's so many comments here. The ones from Richard are always good. I wouldn't worry too much about sanitising. There is no evidence that COVID spreads from...
could you have told me that before, Richard?
Phone-like
Before I spent an hour and a half sanitising that room.
For folks just joining in, also, Richard's the guy marrying us too. So we have a good affinity with Richard.
So the borders need
We're
to
still
be
on,
open for
right?
him.
We're still on?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well,
You have to be able to get in.
we're still getting married.
We're still getting married.
Yeah. And Richard is still going to marry us if he can get in.
Richard also says no system is ever perfect. And I think that's... I mean, there's a number of times, like Scott and I have talked about security systems not having to be perfect to work. It's the same with this. Scott says, Danny Ricciardo, F1 driver, had to isolate when he went back to Australia. Yep, seems reasonable, and he would have been totally cool with that as well. I suspect he's a very different personality to Djokovic. Someone here, Matty 80. The quarantine requirements were scrapped recently for double vaxxed. Now that is true for people coming to Australia. So we've got our friend in Victoria whose parents are flying in from overseas shortly, and I believe they're both double vaxxed, but I think there is still a quarantine requirement for like 72 hours where they have to do a negative test or something. Yeah,
but then the rules are different from different states, because I was still reading that in Queensland you still have to isolate for 2 weeks.
That is true. So you or at least there was a time there last month where you couldn't fly into Queensland internationally, but you could fly into another state.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think as far as Australia goes, we will get parity very, very soon for everywhere other than Western Australia, and then that's just a matter of time. So whether you fly into Victoria or here, and how many times have we said, I think the chronology here is we'll get parity nationally across Australia, and then we'll start to get parity internationally, and then it's just a question of how long will it take, say, before your family can fly over. It'll happen.
One day. We did say that last year too.
Well, we said it's a matter of time last year, and that was right. I just didn't expect it to be quite this long. Brendan's confirmed. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Glad we're up on the the gossip there. Errol, I'm really glad that you both and the rest of your family overcame COVID without serious impact. Yeah, so are we. And I don't feel that it's 100% behind us yet. Only insofar as we just can't go out and do normal stuff, not because we're worried about us, but because of everyone else, frankly, at the moment. James
so many
says,
comments. We're never going to be able to eat dinner tonight, are we?
Oh, we're going to have to kill it soon. A friend of mine supplies Fox with a lot of props, so quite interested in movies continuing down here. So, I mean, James has kind of made the point that there's all these industries that we want to keep going, and this is, and I'm sure it's the same in other parts of the world, but this has been one of the biggest contentious points here in Australia, where there's almost these polar opposites, where there's one side going, so you've got to open up the country, keep the economy going, keep the jobs and keep the businesses alive. There's the other side going, we need to not die. And they're very absolute positions, and I think the struggle for the government has been, how do you balance these two imperatives, because you can't be all on one side or all on the other side. So how much, when, and it hasn't all been linear too. So, New South Wales is now locking down nightclubs and dancing and singing and things like this again, because their outbreak has just been massive.
But then again, it's interesting to see, like with Norway, it's the only country in Europe at the moment that are not serving alcohol, even like at restaurants.
Jeez, I'm glad we're here.
Which is...
But can you go to like the Vinmonopolis thing?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Vinmonopolet.
Can you go there and get alcohol and take it home?
Yeah, I would assume so, but I don't live in Norway at the moment, so I'm actually not sure. So if there's any Norwegians on there that can confirm, but still, like it's you can't go out and have like a nice dinner with a glass of wine. Right. It's like a big difference of a nightclub versus actually going out for just a burger and a beer. Like, but you can't even do that.
The other thing is, you can't exactly go to downtown Oslo now and sit outside and enjoy your
we have outdoor heaters. You'll be all right.
It's not the same. But like we could do that.
Blankets.
We could do that here, like where it's 26 degrees Celsius at the moment. And actually, here's a fun fact. So we none of us have left the boundaries of this property since, I think, the 2nd. So like 5 days, or this would be 6 days in total now, and I've somehow closed my exercise rings every single day, going up and down the stairs, jumping in and out of the pool. We've been playing in the canal. So
I was just reading Scott's comment, and what he calls, you can read it out loud, but it says, yeah, you could, when we were there, because Scott was in Oslo, we loaded up in duty free and then at the Gov Mafia booze shop. So it's
can you explain the Mafia booze shop?
That is Vinmonopolet.
How's it?
That
Why
is-
is it Mafia?
It's not mafia, but it's basically like all alcohol is sold. If it's more than 4.5%, is sold at a dedicated wine and spirit shop in Norway that is owned by the government. So, and it costs a fortune going there. But yeah, it is a bit weird. Like, you know, Norway have a lot of like a bit like old Christian religious stuff. Like, you know, like on election day, you're not allowed to buy alcohol.
They've got like weird rules even without COVID. So Stefan says the boosters are good even if you've had COVID. I think you need to wait a bit after getting infected. Test seems to show a pretty hefty increase in antibodies after the 4th jab. Richard said he's coming for our wedding, which is good. He's a Kiwi after all, so he does have that.
That's good. You can hack the system.
AK Tech says, Troy, you should have come to Canberra for Summer Nats. So this was actually one of the things on all the different ideas we're throwing around about what we do over the holidays. Summer Nats was one of them. So for folks who don't know what Summer Nats is, it's basically like a redneck rev head heaven for several days with just like drag cars and burnouts and...
What did I miss? Because I was reading a comment. What were you
Summer
talking
Nats. We're going to go. Remember we said we're going to go to Summer Nats?
Never heard of that.
That was literally this. I'll show you another time. It's a very car thing and a very kind of modified burnout.
So we're not going to the big mullet festival.
I think there would be in the Venn diagram of Summer Nats and the big mullet festival. There would be a lot in the middle bit. So that would have been good. What else? Because I think we are going to have to go and get some dinner soon. Scott says, in the UK we can buy flammable booze anywhere we like. It's supposed to like that here. But yeah. And as Richard said, the Vinmonopolet thing it's not so much mafia.
It's wine monopoly.
Wine monopoly. It's a cartel. Michelangelo says 26C is awesome. We had a bad summer last year, so I missed the nice weather things. Boy. Stefan says stores aren't allowed to sell alcohol above 2.5% here in Iceland either. Only the government stores. Well, restaurants can, but you can't allowed to leave the restaurant with your drinks.
Is it 2.5, Stefan, or is it 4.5? Because at least it's 4.5 in Norway.
2.5. You'd need to have a lot of those, wouldn't you? So one of the things I think you found strange here, we're getting off COVID now, but like we have BYO, so you can take, the restaurant has to accept it, but a lot of them here do. Like you can take any wine you want, you know, like your cheapy bottle from home or your like epic bottle from home, whatever you want, and you can take it to the restaurant and then drink it there. And then if you don't drink it all, or if you take two and you don't drink it all, you can take home whatever's left as well.
Yeah.
It's very casual here.
It is very casual. But I think in Norway, it's like that's where the money is for a lot of the restaurants is in the alcohol.
It is for a lot of restaurants here too, but then it's attractive to customers to be able to BYO because it saves them money. So they kind of... Look, if you went to like a 5-star silver service restaurant, you couldn't do it. But like Raf's place, as you know, it's BYO. BYO beer as well.
Yeah. Look what Richard is saying.
What's Richard said?
He did publish a pandemic geek out.
I saw that pop up on my podcast list actually. So for folks that haven't listened to the .NET Rocks Geek Outs, listen to that. So we should actually listen to that. So we probably should have listened to that while we're sitting around here trying to... Well, you know, we weren't... I was going to say sitting around here trying to figure out what to do. Every day has actually flown by, hasn't it?
Yeah, and like I just decided to do different... Like, I divided up my days. Like, with morning, I would do all my work emails. And then I will, like, when I was transitioning into lunch, and then I would do, like, yoga, steam shower. And then I would sit out in the balcony and I would read, and then like it would transition into evening. I would watch my iPad, and then like it would be dinner, and then like early night. So I do feel like the day just did kind of disappear. It did.
I guess that's where we were a bit fortunate because you're like, oh, I just went from my steam shower to my balcony in the sun to And it sounded very, very, very privileged, which it is, and we're very conscious of that.
Absolutely.
But I still think the principle of like you broke the day down, and it's like you found some time for exercise, and then you found some time to like have a bath or a shower or something, and then a different time to watch.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just
because if you just sit there and like just look into a screen all the time as well, like I find it feel very repetitive, and it doesn't feel good for you because you don't really feel like you've actually done something with your day. So you just need to kind of feel like, and like I would have calls with people, like FaceTime or try and catch up. So you would do different things during the day because I just didn't want to end up sitting there and just kind of not produce anything or do anything. Or I was even looking up, I'm going to start sewing again. So I was like looking up new sewing techniques. So I feel like I've been like learning different things now. So I'm like fired up to teach Elle how to sew while we're in lockdown. Yeah. We're not in lockdown, but a volunteer.
Self-imposed. Yeah. Self-imposed. Self-imposed, mostly stay at home, go for some walks, that sort of thing. And actually, it's been crap weather too. So there's been that. Like it's been... Normally this time of year it's just blue skies every single day and 30 plus degrees, and it's been raining at some time or another, I think every single day. So, yeah, we've stayed entertained.
Oh, absolutely.
But we're fine. Okay, that's been really long, and it's been nothing at all to do with tech. So, but mind you, we've had more concurrent viewers today. But I don't know if that's because of you or because of the topic. But thanks, folks, for watching. It's just been weird. That's just been our experience. Charlotte's fine.
I'm fine.
The rest of us think we're fine.
I'm a bit sorry that the room service is done now. Now I have to go back to doing house chores.
Are you doing dinner tonight?
Oh. Can I start tomorrow?
Seems to be. Okay. We might heat some pizzas.
All right.
Thanks, folks. See ya.
Bye.